about, the composition. 1. Today I will be discussing The Composition by Antonio Scarmetta and how it represents great examples of Marxism through the way the government treated the anti-fascists. The Composition is about the point of view from a boy named Pedro who lives with his mother and his father in Chile under a dictatorship. Every day after work, Pedro's parents sit down around the radio and listen patiently. One day, Pedro witnesses his friend's father being carried away by soldiers. Then Pedro asks his parents about what happened. He learns that his friend's father, as well as his own parents, are anti-fascist. The next day, a man from the government tells the kids to write an essay about what him and his family do and talk about every day. 1. His parents are very pleased to find out that Pedro just wrote a very bland kind of untruthful essay. There are several examples throughout the story that show how the government treated the anti-fascists, like how the government forced the children to write essays about what their family does in the spare time, or how Pedro's family was so nervous about the government checking on them to see if Pedro had actually wrote the truth in his composition, so they were going to get a chess set. Another good example is how the fascist government would take people captive, and as well, all these examples tie in perfectly with a Marxist lens. The first example of Marxism comes from when the government in Pedro's classroom have them write essays about their family's lives. As stated in the book on page 101, it says, "Write this down. Title of composition, My Home and My Family, Understood. In other words, what you and your parents do from the time you get home from school and work. The friends who come over, what you talk about, comments when watching TV, whatever occurs to you with complete freedom." The quote from the book shows readers how controlling the government proved to be. They used the children as a gateway to find the anti-fascists. However, Pedro was knowledgeable enough to lie in his essay to protect his parents and save them from the government. The second example is how in the composition families have to lie to keep safe. On page 105, after Pedro's father has finished reading Pedro's composition, he said, "Well, I'll have to buy a chess set just in case." This shows how people in Chile were very afraid of the government and how much control they had over them. Pedro decided to go against what the officer had said and to not write about everything. Pedro, being smart, realized the government was trying to decide if a family was anti-fascist or against the government. Knowing his family was anti-fascist, he wrote nothing about that, instead wrote about normal things and even lied to say that they had played chess. If they had found out that Pedro was lying, his family would be in danger of execution or being taken away. According to Alex Henderson, thousands of Allende supporters were killed and tortured during Pinochet's reign of terror, and it wasn't until 1990, after 17 years of fascist rules, when democracy was restored in Chile. The fascist government controlled people with fear and kept them from saying things and doing things they wanted to do. If it weren't for Pedro's little lie, his family could have been thrown into jail. The third example is how the fascist government took people from their home and workplaces for being even just being accused of anti-fascism. On page 97, the author talks about how Daniel's father gets taken away from his workplace by two men with machine guns pointed at him. Oftentimes in Chile around the time period, many people would be taken away without any warning or any time to say goodbye to their families. This is a very cruel and realistic example of how the fascists treated people in Chile. According to Alejandro Ruz, the military would accuse anyone who had been involved in anti-fascism politics. Those people were oftentimes in danger of arrest, torture, and disappearance. Just like in the composition, how Daniel's dad got taken away from his family right in front of his own son's eyes, this was actually a real problem of the fascist government in Chile. The fascist government would rarely give anti-fascists any right or have any chance to defend themselves. The government would just get rid of them. In conclusion, the readers of the composition can conclude that the government in the story was controlling, demanding, and intense. Fascism took over Chile. However, this story focuses on one out of many unfortunate situations in the country. It followed a boy named Pedro and his experiences with the government and his intelligence to save his parents from possible torment.